This is the Unique Scotland podcast with exclusive ScottishVisits.co.uk.
Hello, this is John Robert Mackay Harbour, and welcome to Unique Scotland, the go-to podcast on all things Scottish. And I'm delighted to have you with me for this podcast on Scotland's clans, their rise and their fall. From my last podcast, the Scottish Clans Episode 1, you will recall the discussion on an era of the great feuds, conflicts that could last for generations, fuelled by disputes over land, honour and power. These feuds were not mindless violence, they were governed by codes of honour and custom. They were expressions of deeply held values, of loyalty, courage, justice and the defence of one's people and land. They were part of a larger Gaelic world that stretched across the Highlands and Islands, bound together by history, memory and identity. They adapted to changing circumstances, forged new alliances and found ways to preserve their traditions. But the world around them was changing, and the changes were accelerating. In the first episode I talked about the clans up until the 17th century, when internecine warfare turned clan against clan, leading to their eventual demise. This episode will cover the huge upheaval of the clan system that rocked Scotland, and in particular the Highlands, to the core, and to finish off we will look at where the clans sit today in the 21st century. This whole story stretches from the painted Picts of the 1st century to the Viking raiders of the 9th century, from the rise of Alba, or Scotland as a nation, to the fall of the MacDonald Lords of the Isles, from clan feuds that make modern family arguments look tame, all the way to the Scottish diaspora dispersed all over the globe, and finally the revival of clan identity today. To see some photographs of Scotland's clan map and some of the heraldry surrounding the more well-known clans, then visit my website www.exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk. And you can also link to my other social media channels through my website onto Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. Well, wherever you are in the world, I would now like you to relax and to join me on this amazing journey into the Scottish Highlands and Lowlands to find Scotland's clans and what became of them in this Clans of Scotland, Episode 2. In the first episode, we saw how the clans worked and why they were so successful. They spoke the same language, they followed the same customs, and participated in the same traditions. They were part of a larger Gaelic world that stretched across the Highlands and Islands, bound together by history, family connections, and storytelling. One of the most remarkable aspects of this world was its resilience. Despite political pressure, economic hardship, internal conflict, the clans somehow endured. And within their sphere of influence, they adapted to changing circumstances, forged new alliances, and found ways to persevere and preserve their traditions. However, the outside world, away from clan lands, was changing fast, and those changes were accelerating. Many people believe the clan system worked just fine up until the Battle of Culloden in 1745, when the British government laid down harsh demands on the Highlanders after the Jacobites were totally routed. Actually, it was the Scottish government's efforts to assert control over the Highlands in the early part of the 17th century that started the rot. And just as a reminder, James VI of Scotland, who was Mary Queen of Scots' son, who joined the crowns of Scotland and England by taking the English throne when Queen Elizabeth I died without an heir in 1603. The union of Scotland and England and the birth of Great Britain did not take place until 1707. So it was a Scottish government who introduced the Statutes of Iona in 1609, which required clan chiefs to send their heirs to be educated in the Lowlands, to speak English rather than Gaelic, to support Protestant ministers, and to suppress traditional customs like bards and gatherings. And these statutes were designed to civilise the Highlands, which is a word that reveals much about Lowland Scotland's central authority towards Gaelic culture at the time. The chiefs complied, well, at least on paper, but the heart of the clan system remained Gaelic, communal and fiercely independent. As the 17th century progressed, the clans found themselves drawn into the wider conflicts that engulfed Scotland. The Wars of the Three Kingdoms, the Covenanter uprisings, and the struggles between royalists and parliamentarians. And these conflicts would test the loyalties of the clans, reshape their alliances, and set the stage for the dramatic events of the 18th century. And it's here, in the gathering storm of political and religious upheaval, that the next chapter of the clan's story begins. By the early 17th century, the Highlands stood at a crossroads. The clan system was still strong, still rooted in kinship and tradition, but the world around it was shifting. Scotland was being pulled into the political and religious upheavals that swept across the British Isles, upheavals that would test the loyalties of the clans, reshape their alliances, and ultimately lead them toward a tragic reckoning. The first great storm came with the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, which were a series of interconnected conflicts involving England, Scotland and Ireland, primarily from 1639 to 1651, and that led to significant political and social changes in the British Isles. It encompassed several key conflicts, including the Bishops' Wars, the English Civil Wars and the Irish Confederate Wars, and these wars were deeply rooted in political, religious and dynastic disputes, primarily involving King Charles I of Great Britain, whose supporters were royalists, and his opponents, well, they were English parliamentarians and Scottish Covenanters. And to help explain a little more about the conflicts, the Covenanters of Scotland were members of a religious and political movement that rebelled against the interference of the Stuart kings in the affairs of the Protestant Presbyterian Church. They're best known for signing the National Covenant in 1638, which rejected the king's attempts to force the Scottish Presbyterian Church to conform to English liturgical practice and church governance. There were huge numbers who signed that National Covenant, and of course they became the Covenanters. Effectively, they pledged to uphold their religious beliefs against the Anglican episcopal system trying to be imposed by King Charles I. It was a war fought not just on battlefields, but in hearts and minds, as families and communities wrestled with the questions of faith, loyalty and identity. And it was also a bloody affair. Charles I looked upon the Covenant as a threat to his authority, a rebellious and treasonous attempt to challenge his kingship. The punishments meted out for going against the wishes of the crown were harsh, and many, during this period known as the Killing Times, perished for their beliefs. And the Highlands, they were not united in these conflicts. Some clans supported the Covenanters, who sought to defend Presbyterianism and limit royal authority. Other clans supported the Royalists, the Stuart kings, who believed in the divine right of kings and the traditional order. Still others shifted their allegiance as circumstances changed, guided by pragmatism, survival, or the personal convictions of their chiefs. The Campbells, for example, with their strong ties to the Lowlands and the Crown, aligned themselves to the Covenanters. The MacDonalds, long rivals of the Campbells, supported the Royalists. The Camerons, Macleans, Gordons and Mackenzies also rallied to the Royalist cause, drawn by loyalty to the king or by opposition to Campbell influence. Into this volatile landscape stepped one of the most charismatic and controversial figures in Scottish history, James Graham, the Marquess of Montrose. Now, Montrose was a brilliant military commander, a man of vision and ambition, who believed passionately in the Royalist cause. In 1644, he launched a daring campaign through the Highlands, gathering an army of clansmen and Irish soldiers under the leadership of the formidable Alistair MacColla. Together, they won a series of astonishing victories at Tippermuir, Aberdeen, Inverlochy, Aldern, Alford and Kilsyth, battles that shook the foundations of the Covenanter regime. It was effectively internecine warfare, with half the clans supporting the Royalist Episcopalian cause and the other half supporting the Presbyterian religion. Montrose's army was a Highland force unlike any other. It was a coalition of many of the clans united not by ancient ties, but by a shared religious cause. It was a reminder of the power the clans could wield when they stood together, and yet it was also a fragile alliance, held together by the charisma of its leaders and the urgency of the moment. When Montrose's campaign collapsed in 1645, the clans returned to their own affairs, their own rivalries, their own struggles. The Civil War had shown both the strength and the vulnerability of the clan system, its capacity for unity, but also its deep divisions. King Charles I was eventually defeated, captured, tried, and beheaded, and then Oliver Cromwell ruled the United Kingdom as a republic for around 10 years. On his death, Charles II was restored to the throne, and when he died, James VII took the crown. And I tell you this because it's part of what happened, what was to come, and that was the Jacobite saga. Well, James VII did not last long because in 1688 he was deposed in favour of his daughter, who was married to William of Orange, a Protestant from Holland. One of the main reasons for his downfall and exile to France and Italy was his Roman Catholic faith. It's a bit more complicated, but the removal caused an enormous split in Britain, which saw an effective civil war for almost 55 years. And to try to explain that civil war, James, whose name in Latin is Jacobus, had many supporters even when he was deposed, and they became known as the Jacobites, or Jacobites as we know them today. So, in 1688, James VII is deposed and replaced by the Protestant King William and his wife Mary, who I mentioned was the daughter of James VII. Now, a good section of the Highlands became a stronghold of James or Jacobite support. The first rising in 1689, led by Viscount Dundee, ended in defeat. The second rising in 1715, led by the Earl of Mar, also failed. But the Jacobite spirit endured, sustained by loyalty, memory, and the belief that the Stuart kings would one day return. So on the arrival of James VII's grandson, in the form of Bonnie Prince Charlie in 1745, many of the old Stuart royalist clans rose again to his cause. You'll sometimes hear people talking about the 15 and 45, and what that refers to is the Jacobite risings of the 1715 and 1745 battles, as they're called. And they're probably the most romanticised episodes in Scottish history. And they're remembered for their songs, the stories, the paintings, the Jacobite white cockade, the tartan-clad Highlander, the doomed prince. But behind the romance lies a complex and often painful reality. The Jacobite cause was not simply a dynastic struggle, it was a clash of cultures, religion, identities, and the vision of Scotland's future. King James VII's belief in the divine right of kings and an absolute right to rule, regardless of parliamentary control, was what brought about his real downfall. And although many Highlanders regarded the Stuart kings as representing continuity, tradition, and the old order, the more enlightened clans preferred parliamentary control with the new Hanoverian king and his wife Mary Stuart. He became simply a figurehead with no power, but someone who represented centralisation, modernisation, and especially a maintenance of the Protestant faith. I have to say, when I visit Culloden battlefield and reflect upon some of the clans rising in support of James VII's grandson, Bonnie Prince Charlie, I'm often saddened by the unnecessary slaughter of so many good clansmen in April 1746. Scotland and England had joined to become Great Britain in 1707, 40 years before, and after a failed attempt by James VII's son in 1715 to take back the crown, there was relative peace, albeit some Jacobite rumblings, but over the next few years it was relatively quiet. And then the Jacobite cause found its most dramatic expression in the clan rising of 1745, when Charles Edward Stuart, grandson of James VII, in the form of Bonnie Prince Charlie, landed in the Highlands with little more than a handful of companions and a dream. The prince's arrival electrified some parts of the Highlands, hankering after the old order of things under the Stuart kings. Clans that had been divided for generations rallied to his banner. The Camerons, MacDonalds, Mackenzies, the Stuarts, the Frasers, Macphersons, and many others joined the cause. On the other side, many clans did not support the rising. The more Protestant-leaning Campbells, the Maxwells, Keiths, Forbes, Mackays, Munros, Rosses and Sutherlands, who remained loyal to the government. But enough clans did support the Bonnie Prince to create a formidable army. Of course, there were Irish, English and Welsh Jacobites, as well as French troops sent to support Prince Charles Edward Stuart in his cause to remove the Hanoverian king and return the Stuarts to power. I'm going to do a separate podcast on the Jacobite rising, but I just want to give you a flavour of what happened when Bonnie Prince Charlie landed. At the start of the uprising, the Jacobites won a stunning victory at Preston Pans, capturing Edinburgh and sending shockwaves throughout Britain. They marched into England, reaching as far south as Derby, and for a moment it seemed possible the Stuarts might reclaim the throne. But the dream faltered. Support in England failed to materialise, supplies ran low, and the Jacobite leadership was divided, and so reluctantly the army retreated to Scotland. And the final act came on the 16th of April 1746 on the bleak, windswept moor of Culloden. Culloden was more than a battle, it was a tragedy. The Jacobite army, exhausted and outnumbered, faced a well-equipped government force under the command of the Duke of Cumberland. The Highland charge, that fierce, terrifying rush of men with broadswords and targes, met disciplined musket volleys and grape shot. The battle was over in less than an hour, with 1,500 brave Jacobite supporting clansmen lying dead in the battlefield, against around 30 dead soldiers on the government side. I remember the first time I walked across Culloden Moor. The ground was soft underfoot, the heather low and wind tossed. The sky was grey, heavy with the kind of silence that feels almost sacred. There were a number of small hillocks where the dead were buried that fateful day, and the clan markers, simple stones bearing names like McGilvery, MacLean, MacDonald, Fraser, stand as quiet witnesses to the lives lost to the battle. It's a place where history feels painfully close, where the weight of the past presses against the present. For the clans, the aftermath of Culloden was devastating. The government sought not only to punish rebellion, but to dismantle the clan system itself. The Disarming Act banned weapons. The Proscription Act outlawed Highland dress. The Heritable Jurisdictions Act stripped chiefs of their legal authority. Gaelic was suppressed. Traditional customs were discouraged or banned. The clan system, which had endured for centuries through war, famine and political upheaval, was broken. So the Statutes of Iona in 1609, which tried and failed to break the clan system, was finally avenged by this bloody battle and a government determined to restore order to the Highlands and to Scotland. The aftermath of Culloden was not just the end of a seditious rebellion, it was the end of a way of life. A world that had endured for centuries came crashing down. And in the weeks and months that followed the battle, the British government unleashed a campaign of suppression designed to break the power of the clans once and for all. The Highlands, which for centuries had been a semi-autonomous cultural realm with its own laws, language and social structures, were brought under the direct control of the British Crown, with a speed and severity that shocked even some of those who supported the government. The Disarming Act made it illegal for Highlanders to carry weapons, and that wasn't just swords and muskets, but even dirks and pistols. The Proscription Act outlawed Highland dress for ordinary people. The wearing of tartan, once a symbol of identity and pride, became a punishable offence. The Heritable Jurisdictions Act stripped chiefs of their traditional authority to administer justice, reducing them from leaders of people to mere landlords. And Gaelic, the language of the Highlands, was discouraged in schools and public life. Traditional customs, the gatherings, the music, the poetry, were viewed with suspicion. The clan system, which had survived Viking invasions, medieval wars and centuries of internal conflict, was dismantled in a matter of years. And yet, even in the face of such sweeping change, the spirit of the clans did not vanish. It retreated, it adapted, and endured in ways that would shape the future of Scotland and the wider world. But before that revival could begin, the Highland clans would face one of the darkest chapters in their history, the Highland Clearances. Once again, the Highland Clearances is a separate subject for a separate podcast, but it's relevant here within the clan structure, so I'll give you an idea as to what went on. The clearances were not a single event, but a long, painful process that unfolded from the late 18th century into the 19th. They were driven by economic change, shifting agricultural practices, and the ambitions of landowners, many of whom were themselves clan chiefs who had embraced the new legal and economic order. Sheep farming, with its promise of higher profits, became the new priority. The people who had lived on the land for generations, who'd worked it, cared for it, and considered it part of their identity, were seen as obstacles to progress. Families were evicted from their homes, sometimes with notice, sometimes without. Thatched roofs were burned or torn off cottages to prevent reoccupation. Walls were knocked down, livestock was moved, and entire glens were emptied. And I remember standing in Strathnavor, a wide valley in Mackay country, one of the areas most affected by the clearances, and feeling the weight of absence. The land's beautiful, rolling hills, quiet lochs, the sound of fast-running streams, but there's a silence there that feels unnatural, as if the land's waiting for voices that will never return. The ruins of long-abandoned townships lie scattered across the hillsides of Strathnavor, their stones slowly sinking back into the earth. To me, it's a landscape haunted by memory, and for good reason, because some of my own ancestors were cleared from this place. And some of those who were cleared were resettled on the coasts, where they struggled to make a living from fishing and kelp harvesting. Others emigrated to Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand. And ships left from ports like Ullapool, Thurso and Portree, carrying families who'd never before left their glen, their island or their homeland to pastures new. And those pastures spawned a Scottish diaspora that was vast. Gaelic communities took root in Nova Scotia, Cape Breton, Glengarry and beyond. They brought with them their language, their music, their stories and their sense of identity. And in some places, Gaelic survived longer in the New World than it did in Scotland itself. And yet, even as the Highlands emptied, something remarkable happened. The idea of the clan, the sense of belonging, heritage and shared identity did not die. It transformed. In the 19th century, a romantic revival swept through Scotland, and writers like Sir Walter Scott reimagined the Highlands as a land of noble warriors, mist-shrouded glens and ancient traditions. King George IV visited Edinburgh in 1822, orchestrated by Sir Walter Scott, and he invited him to wear a kilt. And this actually popularised tartan and Highland dress on a scale never seen before. Clan tartans were formalised, often invented or standardised for the first time. The image of the Highlander, the proud, loyal and heroic man, became a symbol of Scottish identity. To be fair, this romanticisation was not always accurate. It smoothed over the complexities of Highland history. It sort of glossed over the pain of the clearances and sometimes turned living traditions into museum pieces. But it also kept the memory of the clans alive at a time when the social structures that had sustained them were fading. Clan societies began to form, first in Scotland, then across the diaspora. These societies preserved genealogies, organised gatherings, and kept alive the stories and traditions of their ancestors. Highland Games, once informal clan gatherings, became formal events celebrating strength and music and culture. The Gaelic language, though under pressure, survived. It endured in the islands and in pockets of the mainland, and in the diaspora, and today it's experiencing a revival supported by schools, media and cultural initiatives. And what of the clans themselves? Though no longer political entities, they've become cultural families. They are global networks of people connected by name, by history and a sense of belonging. You don't need to prove bloodline to be part of a clan. You don't need to own land or live in Scotland. If you feel connected, through ancestry, through interest, through heart, you belong. This, I think, is the most remarkable part of the clan story. The clan system as a political structure was dismantled. The chiefs lost their authority. The people were scattered. The land was transformed. And yet, the idea of the clan, the sense of identity, community and heritage, well, it survived. And it survived because it was never just about power or land. It was about people. It was about the stories they told, the memories they carried, the connections they forged. It was about belonging. And whenever I stand on a Highland hillside, whether in Skerra, up in Sutherland, my Scottish family home, or Glencoe, Strathnaver or the Isle of Skye, I feel that belonging. The wind carries it, the land remembers it, the stones hold it, the clans are not gone. They're part of the landscape, part of the culture, part of the people who still feel their pull. And the story of the clans is not a story of loss, it's a story of resilience, a story of survival, a story of identity that endures across centuries, across oceans, across generations. And in that sense, the clans are still alive. Not as political powers, but as living traditions, carried forward by people who remember, who care, and who continue to find meaning in the echoes of the past. And, at this moment, with upwards of 40 million Scottish diaspora scattered around the world, there'll be many who can relate to this feeling of Scottishness, of a clan connection, and who also find meaning in the echoes of the past. One could say that the clearances and emigrations from famine and disease proved to be a great benefit to the rest of the world. As it turns out, the Scottish diaspora has been a significant factor in shaping global dynamics, with Scots leaving an indelible mark on societies where they've settled. And this includes contributions to infrastructure development, education, commerce and cultural exchange. The one thing that I've not touched upon, and which is probably most closely associated with clans, is the iconic identifier of a Scotsman, and that is the kilt, and also the tartan that is worn. It's funny, everyone associates with clans, even people who couldn't tell a MacLeod from a Mackinnon, and to be honest, most can't. And yes, I can already hear someone saying, but John, didn't the ancient Celts wear kilts? Well, not quite. The earliest form of what we'd recognise as a kilt was the fellamore, the belted plaid, a massive piece of tartan cloth pleated by hand, belted at the waist, with the top half draped over the shoulder. It was warm, practical and, let's be honest, probably a bit of a faff to put on in the morning. But if you lived in the Highlands, where the weather can change 6 times before breakfast, it was perfect. The tailored or knee-length kilt, the one we know today, didn't appear until the early 18th century. It was a practical adaptation for working men, and it caught on quickly, and then, of course, it became a symbol, a statement, a badge of identity. Tartan's more than just a pattern, it has deeper roots. Pattern cloth existed long before clans adopted specific designs, but by the 16th and 17th centuries, certain regions and families began favouring particular colours and patterns. And over time, these became associated with clans. And yes, some tartans were invented or formalised in the 19th century during the Great Highland Revival. But that doesn't make them any less meaningful. Culture evolves, identity evolves, and tartan is now one of the most recognisable symbols of Scotland worldwide. And if you've ever worn your clan tartan, or even just admired one, you'll know the feeling. It's like wrapping yourself in history. So where does this all leave us? The clan system as a political and social structure is gone, we know that. It was dismantled by law, economics, and the brutal aftermath of Culloden. But the spirit of the clans, the identity, the pride, the sense of belonging, that's very much alive. For example, I'm very proud to state that I'm a member of the Clan Mackay Society of Scotland. And I'm even prouder to announce that I was recently elected as the president of our clan society, which works closely with a group of similar-minded individuals who wish to keep our clan memory alive, as well as doing some good charitable work for clan members around the world. And I'm delighted to say that our clan chief, the Lord Ray, is an active member of our society as well. And interestingly enough, our storyteller, or Sheniki, lives outside Scotland. And we're very lucky to have 2 Shenikis. Hunter Mackay is from the USA and Chris Mackey is from Canada. So you can see the Mackay clan members hail from all over the world. And if you're connected in any way to Clan Mackay, even through a sept, and you wish to join our society, then please visit our website, www.clanmackaysociety.co.uk, for an application or even just to check out what we're up to. So today we find that clan societies flourish, tartans are worn with pride, Highland games bring people together, the diaspora communities around the world celebrate their heritage, castles and clan seats are still preserved, clan stories are told and retold, and not necessarily for nostalgia, but as a living thread that connects us to the people who came before. And if you'll allow me a moment of personal reflection, as a Mackay myself, I feel this deeply. When I walk through the north, through the lands my ancestors defended and farmed and were eventually cleared from, there's a sense of connection that's hard to put into words. It's not about romanticising the past, and it's not about ignoring the hardships. It's about recognising that we are part of a story, one that began long before us and will continue long after us. And that, I think, is the real legacy of the clans. Well, that is the finale to Scottish Clans, and thank you for joining me on this journey. From the painted Picts to the Gaels of Dalriata, from Viking raids to the rise of Alba, from clan feuds to Culloden, and from the clearances to the modern revival. The Scottish clan system is a story of a people who endured, adapted, and carried their culture across oceans and centuries. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with someone who loves Scotland, or someone who's walked its hills without knowing the stories beneath their feet. I know it will touch someone somewhere. In my next podcast, I'm going to complement my clan series by covering tartan, the pattern cloth consisting of crossing horizontal and vertical bands of woven wool material in multiple colours. Tartan came to signify a clan's identity, but you might be surprised to hear that this was more a modern adaptation rather than a historical norm. And you'll hear of tartan's roots, its early hints of pattern-based identity, its symbolism and suppression, and its eventual global spread. During my research of tartan, I was looking to find where tartan is produced in Scotland today, and that led me to meet a lovely lady called Claire Campbell, who owns the amazing weaving mill at a small village called Eventon, just north of Inverness. And she's also the founder of the Prickly Thistle brand, which specialises in handcrafted tartan. It was great to get her perspective on Scotland's most iconic cloth, and you'll hear from Claire in the Tartan podcast. I expected to have 5 or 10 minutes with Claire, but because it was such a fascinating and fun conversation, I've decided to make our chat into a standalone podcast that you will love. And I'll publish that soon after my Tartan podcast. Well, as always, I've thoroughly enjoyed bringing a part of Scottish history to you. I always welcome feedback, so if you wish to comment on any of the areas we've covered today, or if you wish me to cover any aspect of Scottish life, then please do get in touch through the contact page on my website or send an email to john@exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk. I'm also very pleased to have heard from many of you who have listened to the podcast, and it's always great to meet some of you personally. Do please keep your messages of support coming, and don't forget, if you intend visiting Scotland and want the best experience with a guide, then do get in touch to discuss the possibility of a tour with me. And if you have followed any of my tour routes, especially from previous podcasts, then do send a photograph of you on part of your trip with your name, and I'll get it up on social media. I particularly like photographs of you next to the wonderful Mackay Country granite obelisks that you'll meet on your journey as you head into Sutherland in the far north of Scotland. And thank you so much to those of you who have bought me a coffee recently. And if you wish to contribute in a small way to these podcasts, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Unique Scotland. All contributions are much appreciated, and please do share these Unique Scotland podcasts with friends and family, especially this one on clans, as I'm sure it will touch someone you know and love. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you all listening today, and I would now like to sign off in traditional Scottish fashion by raising my glass with a wee dram to you, wherever you are in the world. Slán de bha.
You've been listening to the Unique Scotland podcast with exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk. To receive all our episodes automatically, please subscribe now.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.